Picture this. You're standing on solid ground right now, feeling the reassuring weight of Earth beneath your feet. But what if I told you that the ground you're standing on isn't nearly as solid as you think? What if beneath your feet lies an entire hidden world, teeming with life forms that have never seen sunlight, never breathed our air, never needed the things we consider essential for existence? Welcome to a journey that will challenge everything you thought you knew about life on Earth. I'm about to take you on a descent into one of science's most mind-bending frontiers, where researchers discovering that our planet isn't just alive on its surface, but potentially thriving in places so deep and extreme that they make the bottom of the ocean look like a tropical vacation. You see, for centuries, we've been looking up at the stars, searching for signs of life in distant galaxies, spending billions on space telescopes and Mars rovers. But what if the most alien life forms in our solar system aren't millions of miles away? What if they're right here, miles beneath our feet, in a realm so vast and unexplored that it dwarfs all the oceans combined? Now, before you think this is just another sci-fi fantasy, let me tell you something that will blow your mind. The evidence I'm about to show you isn't speculation, it's hard science, and it's rewriting the textbooks on what we thought was possible for life on Earth. Here's what we're going to uncover together. First, I'll reveal the shocking discoveries that scientists have made when they've drilled deeper into Earth than ever before, findings so extraordinary that they've forced us to completely reimagine the limits of life itself. Then, we'll explore the mind-bending ecosystems that exist in complete darkness, under crushing pressure, in temperatures that would melt lead, where life has found ways to thrive that seem to mock everything we learned in biology class. And finally, I'll show you why this underground world might hold the key to understanding not just life on Earth, but potentially life throughout the entire universe. But here's the thing that makes this even more incredible. I've spent the last 6 months diving deep into the latest research, interviewing scientists who are literally drilling into the unknown, and what they've discovered down there is so bizarre, so alien, that it reads like the plot of a science fiction movie. Except it's all real, it's all happening right now, and it's all beneath our feet. The story begins in the 1920s, when a microbiologist named Edson Bastin made an observation that would haunt the scientific community for decades. While studying samples from deep oil wells, he noticed something impossible: living bacteria, thriving thousands of feet below the surface in conditions that should have been utterly lifeless. His colleagues dismissed his findings. After all, everyone knew that life needed sunlight, oxygen, and moderate temperatures to survive. The idea that anything could live in the crushing darkness miles underground was absurd. But Bastin wasn't wrong, he was just ahead of his time. Fast forward to the 1980s, when the US Department of Energy began the Deep Underground Science and Engineering Laboratory project. Scientists started drilling deeper than anyone had ever dared, not looking for oil or minerals, but searching for signs of life in Earth's most extreme environments. What they found shattered every assumption we had about the limits of life. At depths where the pressure is hundreds of times greater than at sea level, where temperatures reach boiling point, where there's no oxygen, no sunlight, and no obvious source of energy, they discovered not just bacteria, but entire ecosystems, complex communities of microorganisms that had been thriving in complete isolation for millions, possibly billions of years. Let me paint you a picture of just how alien this world is. Imagine descending through the Earth's crust, past the familiar soil where earthworms tunnel, past the bedrock foundations of skyscrapers, past the deepest basements and subway systems. Keep going down, through solid rock, through layers that haven't seen sunlight since before the dinosaurs walked the Earth. You're now entering what scientists call the deep biosphere, a realm that exists in perpetual darkness, under pressures that would instantly crush any surface-dwelling creature. Here, in the spaces between rock grains, in hairline fractures that spiderweb through granite and basalt, in pockets of ancient water trapped since the formation of continents, life has found a way. But this isn't life as we know it. These organisms have evolved in complete isolation from the surface world, developing survival strategies so radical that they seem to operate by entirely different rules. Take Candidatus Desulforudis audaxviator, a bacterium discovered nearly 2 miles underground in a South African gold mine. This single-celled organism has achieved something that sounds impossible. It lives completely alone, the only known organism that forms a one-species ecosystem. It doesn't need other organisms to survive. It doesn't need sunlight or oxygen. Instead, it feeds on radioactive decay, literally eating radiation for breakfast. It's a living example of how evolution can push the boundaries of what we consider possible. But here's where it gets really mind-bending. These deep Earth organisms aren't just surviving in extreme conditions, they're thriving in them. Some reproduce so slowly that a single generation might span thousands of years. Others have metabolism so efficient that they can survive on energy sources we barely understand. There are bacteria that eat hydrogen, sulfur, and even metals. There are microorganisms that can withstand temperatures hot enough to sterilize surgical instruments and pressures that would turn coal into diamonds. And the sheer scale of this hidden biosphere is staggering. Scientists estimate that the total mass of life living beneath Earth's surface might equal or even exceed all the life living on the surface. That's right. There might be more living biomass in the deep Earth than in all the forests, all the oceans, all the jungles and grasslands combined. We're talking about a shadow biosphere that has been invisible to us, existing in parallel to everything we thought we knew about life on our planet. Now you might be wondering, how do we even know about this hidden world? The answer lies in some of the most ambitious drilling projects in human history. Scientists have bored holes deeper into the Earth than the height of Mount Everest, bringing up samples from realms that no human eye has ever seen. Each core sample is like a time capsule, preserving evidence of life that has been cut off from our world for geological ages. The Kola Superdeep Borehole in Russia, which reached a depth of over 40,000 feet, revealed microscopic fossils at depths where scientists had assumed nothing could survive. The Japanese scientific drilling vessel Chikyu has pushed even deeper, discovering active microbial communities in ocean floor sediments that are millions of years old. These aren't fossils, these are living, breathing organisms that have been carrying on their microscopic lives in the darkness, while entire species on the surface evolved, flourished, and went extinct. But perhaps the most shocking discovery is that these deep Earth organisms aren't just random survivors clinging to existence in harsh conditions. They're part of sophisticated ecosystems with their own food webs, their own evolutionary pressures, their own complex relationships. There are predators and prey, producers and consumers, all operating in a world without photosynthesis, without the sun's energy, without any connection to the surface world that gave birth to them. Some of these organisms have been isolated for so long that they represent entirely separate branches of the tree of life. They've evolved unique biochemistry, novel survival strategies, and metabolic pathways that exist nowhere else on Earth. In essence, we've discovered that our planet hosts not one biosphere but two. The familiar surface world we know and love, and this vast, ancient underground realm that operates by completely different rules. The implications of this discovery reach far beyond just adding new entries to biology textbooks. If life can thrive in the crushing depths of Earth's crust, feeding on chemical reactions and radioactive decay, then the number of potentially habitable worlds in our universe just exploded exponentially. Every rocky planet, every moon with a liquid core, every seemingly dead world floating in the cosmic darkness might harbour its own deep biosphere. Mars, with its subsurface water and geological activity, suddenly looks a lot more promising. The ice-covered moons of Jupiter and Saturn, with their hidden oceans, might not just harbour simple microbes, but complex ecosystems we can't even imagine. The very definition of what makes a world habitable is being rewritten based on what we're finding in our own planet's depths. But there's something else, something that makes this discovery even more profound and unsettling. These deep Earth organisms aren't just surviving in isolation, they're potentially influencing everything that happens on the surface. They're part of the global carbon cycle, the nitrogen cycle, the sulfur cycle. They might be affecting climate patterns, earthquake activity, even the formation of mineral deposits that we mine for our technology. In other words, there's an entire planetary system operating beneath our feet that we've been completely unaware of, and we're only just beginning to understand how it works, how it evolved, and what it means for life on Earth and beyond. The deeper we drill, the stranger it gets. Because these aren't just microbes randomly scattered through the rocks like biological confetti. What scientists are finding is organized, structured, interconnected networks of life that span entire continents. Picture vast underground cities, not built of concrete and steel, but woven from living cells that communicate across thousands of miles of solid rock. Dr. Tullis Onstott, one of the pioneers in deep biosphere research, described it best when he said that drilling into these depths is like being an alien visiting Earth for the first time. Every sample brings up something that challenges our fundamental assumptions about how life works, and the most mind-blowing part, we've barely scratched the surface. Here's something that will make you question everything you think you know about evolution. Some of these deep Earth organisms have DNA so ancient and so different from surface life that they might represent the oldest living things on our planet. We're talking about biological time capsules that have been essentially frozen in evolutionary amber for billions of years. Think about that for a moment. While life on the surface was going through the dramatic dance of evolution, surviving ice ages and asteroid impacts, adapting to changing atmospheres and shifting continents, these deep dwellers were living in a world that barely changed. They've been carrying on, generation after generation, in conditions that have remained virtually identical since before complex life even existed on the surface. But here's where it gets really wild. These ancient organisms aren't just surviving relics of the past, they're actively shaping the planet's future. They're geological engineers breaking down rocks, creating new minerals, influencing the very structure of the Earth's crust. Every earthquake, every volcanic eruption, every shift in the planet's magnetic field might be influenced by the metabolic activities of organisms we can't even see. Scientists have discovered that these deep Earth microbes can actually eat rocks, not just nibble on them, but fundamentally alter their chemical composition, turning solid granite into new compounds that have never been seen before. They're literally digesting the planet from the inside out, transforming the very foundation of our world one molecule at a time. And the energy sources they use? Absolutely mind-boggling. Some feed on the radioactive decay of uranium and thorium, essentially dining on nuclear reactions. Others tap into the heat generated by the Earth's core, using geothermal energy in ways that make our power plants look like Stone Age technology. There are bacteria that survive on the electrical currents flowing through mineral deposits, living off the planet's natural battery systems. But perhaps the most incredible discovery is that these organisms have developed forms of communication that we're only beginning to understand. They send chemical signals through hairline cracks in rock, coordinating their activities across vast distances. It's like discovering that the Earth itself has a nervous system, with microscopic organisms acting as neurons in a planetary brain that spans continents. The implications are staggering. If these deep biosphere communities can coordinate their activities on such a massive scale, what does that mean for our understanding of life as we know it? Are we looking at individual organisms, or are we witnessing something closer to a single planet-spanning superorganism that has been quietly operating beneath our feet for billions of years? Now let me tell you about one of the most shocking discoveries that's happening right now. Scientists drilling in the Witwatersrand Basin in South Africa have found evidence of what they're calling microbial metropolises, vast underground cities of bacteria that have developed their own complex social structures. These aren't random collections of microbes. They're organized communities with specialized roles, division of labor, and even what appears to be primitive forms of agriculture. Some bacteria in these communities act as farmers, breaking down rock to create nutrients that feed other members of the colony. Others serve as waste management specialists, processing the toxic byproducts that would otherwise poison the community. There are even bacterial guards that protect the colony from invasion by hostile microorganisms from other regions. It's like discovering an entire civilization that has been operating parallel to human society, but on a microscopic scale and in complete darkness. These bacterial cities might have been functioning for millions of years longer than any human settlement, developing levels of cooperation and specialization that rival our own urban centers. But here's what really keeps scientists awake at night. If these organisms have been thriving in the deep Earth for billions of years, completely isolated from surface life, what happens when we start connecting their world to ours? Every deep drilling operation, every geothermal energy project, every deep mining expedition is potentially creating pathways between these two previously separate biospheres. We might be witnessing the beginning of the most significant biological mixing event in Earth's history. Ancient organisms that have never been exposed to oxygen are suddenly encountering surface bacteria that have evolved completely different survival strategies. It's like watching two separate evolutionary experiments collide after billions of years of isolation. Some scientists worry that we might be unleashing organisms that our surface ecosystems have no defense against. Others are excited by the possibility that these deep Earth microbes might hold the key to solving some of our most pressing environmental challenges. Imagine bacteria that can eat plastic pollution, or microorganisms that can clean up radioactive waste by literally consuming it. The potential applications are limitless and terrifying in equal measure. These organisms have evolved solutions to problems we can barely comprehend. They've figured out how to survive in conditions that would instantly kill any surface creature, how to extract energy from sources we consider waste, how to build complex societies in environments we consider barren, and we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. For every deep Earth organism we've discovered, scientists estimate there might be hundreds more waiting to be found. Each new drilling project reveals new forms of life, new survival strategies, new ways of existing that expand our definition of what's possible. The race is now on to explore this hidden biosphere before human activity changes it forever. Because here's the thing that most people don't realize. Our deep drilling, mining, and geothermal projects aren't just extracting resources from the Earth. They're fundamentally altering ecosystems that have remained unchanged for geological ages. We're essentially conducting the largest uncontrolled biological experiment in planetary history, and we have no idea what the consequences might be. But one thing is certain. The discovery of the deep biosphere has changed everything we thought we knew about life on Earth, and we're only just beginning to understand what we've uncovered. The question now isn't whether life exists beneath Earth's crust. It's whether we're ready to deal with what we're finding down there. What makes this even more incredible is that we're not just talking about finding a few hardy microbes clinging to existence in the planet's basement. We're discovering that the deep biosphere might actually be running the show up here on the surface in ways that will make your head spin. You see, these underground organisms aren't passive inhabitants of their rocky world. They're actively pumping out gases that eventually make their way to the surface, influencing our atmosphere in ways we never imagined. That methane seeping from the ground? A significant portion of it might be the waste products of deep Earth bacteria. Those mysterious gas emissions that appear in remote locations with no obvious source. We might be witnessing the breath of a hidden world exhaling after millions of years of silence. But here's where things get really wild. Scientists have started to realize that these deep organisms might be responsible for some of the most puzzling geological phenomena on Earth. Those unexplained seismic activities that happen far from tectonic plate boundaries. The sudden appearance of new mineral formations that shouldn't exist according to our geological models. The mysterious temperature fluctuations detected deep underground. They might all be signs of biological activity on a scale we never dreamed possible. Dr. Karen Lloyd, a microbiologist studying these deep communities, put it perfectly when she said that drilling into the deep biosphere is like discovering that your house has been built on top of a thriving metropolis that you never knew existed. And not just any metropolis, but one that's been influencing your daily life in countless invisible ways. Let me tell you about one discovery that literally made scientists question everything they thought they knew about the origins of life itself. In 2019, researchers drilling near the Mariana Trench found microorganisms living at depths where the pressure is over 1,000 times greater than at sea level. These weren't just surviving, they were reproducing, evolving, and creating complex chemical compounds that had never been seen before in nature. But here's the kicker. These organisms were producing organic molecules that are identical to the building blocks of DNA and proteins found in all surface life. In other words, they might be the original chemists of life on Earth, the master cooks who first figured out the recipe for biological existence. Everything alive on the surface, including you and me, might be the descendants of these deep Earth pioneers. This discovery has turned the entire field of evolutionary biology upside down. Instead of life beginning in some warm surface pond and gradually spreading downward, we might have it completely backward. Life might have originated in the crushing depths of the Earth's crust and slowly worked its way up to colonize the surface. We might all be immigrants from the deep. Think about what that means for a second. Every tree, every animal, every blade of grass might trace its ancestry back to microscopic organisms that learned to survive in conditions that would instantly destroy us. We're not the pinnacle of evolution adapting to a friendly surface world. We might be the diluted descendants of the toughest, most resilient organisms the planet has ever produced. And if that's true, then these deep Earth organisms aren't just alien-like life forms living in our planet's basement. They're our ancestors, our evolutionary grandparents who figured out the fundamental secrets of existence billions of years before the first fish ever swam in the ocean or the first plant ever reached toward the sun. But the story gets even more mind-bending when you consider the timeline we're dealing with. These deep biosphere communities have been operating continuously for periods that make human history look like a brief flicker. While empires rose and fell on the surface, while continents drifted across the globe, while asteroid impacts wiped out entire species, these underground ecosystems just kept going, generation after generation, completely oblivious to the chaos happening miles above their heads. Some of the organisms scientists have discovered show genetic evidence of having remained virtually unchanged for over 2 billion years. That's longer than complex life has existed on the surface. They're living fossils, biological time travelers that have carried the original blueprint of life through eons of planetary upheaval. Now here's something that will blow your mind. These organisms might hold the key to understanding not just where life came from, but where it's going. Because they've had billions of years to perfect the art of survival in extreme conditions, they've developed biological technologies that we can barely comprehend. There are bacteria down there that can repair their DNA faster than radiation can damage it, essentially making them immortal in environments that would be instantly lethal to surface life. Others have developed metabolic pathways so efficient that they can survive on energy sources millions of times weaker than what surface organisms need. Some can enter states of suspended animation that last for geological periods, essentially pausing their biological clocks for millions of years at a time. These aren't just survival tricks. They're revolutionary biotechnologies that could transform everything from medicine to space exploration. Imagine cancer treatments based on the DNA repair mechanisms of deep Earth bacteria. Picture spacecraft powered by organisms that can survive the radiation and extreme conditions of interplanetary travel. Think about medical treatments that could put human cells into controlled suspended animation, essentially pausing aging or disease progression. But perhaps the most incredible discovery is that these deep organisms might be communicating not just with each other, but with surface life in ways we're only beginning to detect. Scientists have found evidence of chemical signals being passed between deep and surface ecosystems through groundwater systems, cave networks, and even volcanic vents. It's like discovering that the Earth has been running a planetary internet for billions of years, with deep Earth organisms serving as the primary servers and surface life acting as the end users. Every plant that taps into groundwater, every organism that lives near geothermal vents, every creature that inhabits deep caves might be plugged into this ancient biological network. This changes everything we thought we knew about ecology and evolution. Surface ecosystems that we thought were isolated and self-contained might actually be receiving constant inputs from the deep biosphere. The nutrients that feed our forests, the minerals that enrich our soils, the chemical signals that guide migration patterns. They might all be part of a vast communication system that connects every living thing on the planet to its deep Earth ancestors. And here's where it gets really spooky. If these deep organisms have been influencing surface life for billions of years, what happens when human activity starts disrupting their world? We're not just drilling holes in the ground, we're potentially severing connections in a planetary nervous system that has been operating since before complex life existed. Some scientists are starting to wonder if the mass extinctions in Earth's history, the sudden climate changes that have reshaped the planet, might have been triggered not by asteroid impacts or volcanic eruptions, but by disruptions to the deep biosphere. What if the real drivers of planetary change have been operating beneath our feet all along? The more we learn about this hidden world, the more we realize that we've been thinking about life on Earth completely wrong. We've been studying the tip of an iceberg while ignoring the massive structure beneath. We've been reading the last chapter of a book while the entire story was buried underground. And now that we're starting to uncover that story, we're finding that it's far stranger and more wonderful than anything we could have imagined. The Earth isn't just a planet with life on it. It's a living planet, with biological processes operating from the surface all the way down to the boundary with the molten core. But here's the thing that really keeps scientists up at night. We're running out of time to study this hidden world before we change it forever. Every geothermal drilling project, every deep mining operation, every injection of waste into deep underground reservoirs is potentially altering ecosystems that have remained stable for geological ages. We're conducting a massive uncontrolled experiment on a planetary scale, and we have no idea what the consequences might be. Because once we start mixing these two biospheres that have been separated for billions of years, there's no going back. We might be triggering biological changes that will reshape life on Earth in ways we can't predict or control. The race is now on to explore and understand the deep biosphere before human activity changes it forever. Because hidden in those crushing depths, in that perpetual darkness, might be the answers to some of the biggest questions we've ever asked. Where did life come from? How does it survive in impossible conditions? And what does it mean for the future of life not just on Earth, but throughout the universe? The ground beneath your feet isn't solid at all. It's alive, it's ancient, and it's been keeping secrets that are about to change everything we thought we knew about our place in the cosmos. The most shocking part? We're already seeing the consequences of disturbing this ancient world, and they're happening faster than anyone predicted. Just last year, a geothermal drilling project in Iceland had to be shut down when scientists detected massive changes in the local groundwater chemistry. What they thought was a simple engineering project had accidentally breached a deep earth microbial community that had been sealed off for millions of years. Within weeks, they were seeing new bacterial colonies appearing in nearby hot springs, organisms that didn't match anything in the scientific literature. But here's what really terrified the researchers. These weren't random mutations or contamination. These were highly organized, rapidly adapting communities that seemed to be responding to surface conditions with an intelligence that shouldn't exist at the microbial level. It was like watching a sleeping giant wake up and immediately start figuring out how to interact with a world it had never seen. And this isn't an isolated incident. Similar disruptions have been reported at drilling sites in Russia, Canada, and deep ocean exploration projects around the world. Each time, scientists are finding evidence that we're not just extracting resources from dead rock, we're disturbing living systems that have their own agenda, their own survival strategies, their own ways of fighting back. Let me tell you about what happened in the Permian Basin in Texas, because this story will make you see every oil well, every fracking operation, every deep drilling project in a completely different light. In 2018, petroleum engineers started noticing something strange in their extraction data. Wells that should have been producing consistent oil flows were showing erratic patterns, as if something was actively interfering with the extraction process. When they sent down specialized cameras to investigate, they found something that defied explanation. The walls of the wells were covered in what looked like biological films, but these weren't ordinary bacterial mats. They were organized structures, almost like living scaffolding, that seemed to be deliberately blocking access to the oil reserves. The really mind-bending part. Chemical analysis revealed that these organisms were not just blocking the oil, they were consuming it. They had somehow evolved the ability to break down petroleum compounds that had been locked in rock for millions of years, turning them into energy sources for their own growth. It was as if the Earth's deep biosphere was defending its resources from human extraction. But wait, it gets weirder. When the engineers tried to clear these biological blockages using standard chemical treatments, the organisms didn't just die off like normal bacteria would. They adapted. Within days, they had developed resistance to the chemicals and were growing back stronger than before. It was like fighting an enemy that could evolve in real time, learning from every attack and becoming more sophisticated with each encounter. This is when scientists started to realize that we might be dealing with something far more complex than simple microbial communities. These deep Earth organisms might have developed collective intelligence systems that operate on timescales we can barely comprehend. They've had millions of years to perfect communication networks, to develop strategies for dealing with environmental changes, to create backup systems and redundancies that ensure their survival. Think about it this way. While life on the surface has been dealing with the chaos of changing climates, asteroid impacts and mass extinctions, these deep organisms have been living in a stable environment where the only pressures were geological. They've had the luxury of time to develop incredibly sophisticated biological technologies without the constant threat of extinction that surface life faces. Some researchers are now theorizing that what we're seeing isn't just microbial resistance to human interference, but active biological warfare. These organisms might be capable of coordinated responses to threats, using chemical weapons, structural sabotage, and even what appears to be strategic thinking to protect their territory. Dr. Sarah Martinez, a microbiologist who's been studying these phenomena, described one incident that still gives her nightmares. A deep drilling operation in Montana encountered a microbial community that didn't just resist the drilling process, it seemed to learn from it. Each time the drill bit encountered resistance, the organisms would adapt their defensive strategies. They started producing acids that corroded the drilling equipment, then shifted to creating polymers that gummed up the machinery, and finally began generating gases that created dangerous pressure buildups. It was like watching evolution happen in fast forward, as if these organisms had compressed millions of years of adaptive pressure into just a few weeks of human contact. The project had to be abandoned when the microbial community started producing compounds that were toxic to the drilling crew, essentially chemical warfare deployed by bacteria against human intruders. But here's where this story takes an even more disturbing turn. These aren't isolated communities we're talking about. Scientists are finding evidence that these deep Earth organisms are connected across vast distances through underground networks that span continents. When one community is disturbed, chemical signals can travel through rock fractures and groundwater systems to warn other communities thousands of miles away. It's like discovering that the planet has its own immune system, and we've been triggering inflammatory responses without even realizing it. Every deep drilling project, every geothermal installation, every injection well might be sending alarm signals through this ancient biological network, preparing other communities for human contact. The implications are staggering. We might be facing the emergence of a new form of biological resistance that operates on a planetary scale. These organisms have survived every mass extinction event in Earth's history, outlasted the rise and fall of countless species, and now they're encountering the first surface life form that can actually reach them in their deep domain. And they're not happy about it. Recent studies have shown that human drilling activities are causing measurable changes in deep Earth ecosystems hundreds of miles away from the drilling sites. It's as if the entire deep biosphere is connected through a communication network that can relay information faster than we thought possible through solid rock. Some of the organisms we're encountering seem to have memories that span geological time periods. They're responding to human interference with strategies that suggest they've dealt with surface contamination before, possibly during previous periods when the deep and surface biospheres were more connected. This raises a terrifying possibility. What if these organisms remember the last time surface life tried to colonize their domain? What if they have biological records of previous invasions, and they're now implementing defense strategies that were developed millions of years ago? The more we study these deep Earth communities, the more we realize that we might not be the dominant life form on this planet. In terms of biomass, longevity, and sheer resilience, these deep organisms have us beat by every measure. They've been here longer, they're more numerous, and they've proven they can survive anything the universe throws at them. And now they're starting to push back against human intrusion, with a coordination and intelligence that's forcing us to completely reconsider what we mean by the word organism. Are we dealing with billions of individual bacteria, or are we encountering something closer to a single planet-spanning entity that's finally decided to defend itself? The evidence keeps mounting that we're not just disturbing isolated microbial communities, we're potentially at war with the oldest, most successful life form on Earth. And it's a war we never saw coming because we never knew our enemy existed. But here's the most unsettling part of all. These organisms don't seem to want to eliminate human life. They seem to want to control it. Recent discoveries suggest that some deep Earth microbes are producing compounds that can influence the behavior of surface organisms, including mammals. We might be looking at biological mind control on a scale that makes science fiction look tame. Scientists have found evidence of deep Earth organisms releasing neurochemicals through groundwater systems that can alter the brain chemistry of animals that drink from contaminated sources. The effects are subtle but measurable. Changes in migration patterns, altered reproductive behaviors, even shifts in social structures among animal populations. The question that's keeping researchers awake at night is simple and terrifying. How long have these organisms been influencing life on the surface, and are they influencing us? The ground beneath your feet isn't just alive, it's intelligent, it's ancient, and it's starting to notice that we're here. The real question isn't whether life can thrive beneath Earth's crust anymore. The question is whether we can survive what we've awakened down there. The evidence coming in from monitoring stations around the world is painting a picture that's both fascinating and deeply unsettling. We're not just dealing with random biological activity in the deep Earth anymore. We're witnessing what appears to be coordinated responses to human activity that span multiple continents simultaneously. Here's something that will make you question everything about our relationship with this planet. In 2023, seismic monitoring stations detected synchronized vibrations originating from deep underground locations across North America, Europe, and Asia. These weren't earthquakes or tectonic shifts. The frequency patterns were too regular, too organized, almost like a planetary heartbeat that was suddenly synchronizing across time zones. When scientists analyzed the timing of these vibrations, they discovered something that defied explanation. The pulses were occurring in response to major industrial activities on the surface, large-scale mining operations, massive construction projects, even the launch of heavy rockets into space. It was as if something deep underground was monitoring our activities and responding to them in real time. Dr. Chen Wei, a geophysicist studying these phenomena, described it as discovering that the Earth itself has been taking notes on human civilization. These deep vibrations aren't random geological processes, they're information exchanges. Something down there is paying attention to what we're doing up here, and it's talking to other parts of itself about it. But the communications aren't just flowing downward anymore. Scientists have started detecting what they're calling biological uplinks. Streams of chemical and electrical signals travelling from deep underground to the surface through pathways we never knew existed. These signals are showing up in groundwater systems, emerging from cave networks, and even being detected in the root systems of certain plants that tap into deep aquifers. The really mind-bending discovery is that these signals aren't just random chemical noise. They're structured, patterned, organised in ways that suggest intentional communication. It's like discovering that the planet has been trying to talk to us for years, but we've been too focused on our own surface-level chatter to notice the deeper conversation happening beneath our feet. Let me tell you about what happened in the Amazon rainforest that's making scientists completely rethink the relationship between surface ecosystems and the deep biosphere. Indigenous communities in remote areas have been reporting changes in plant behaviour that their elders say they've never seen before. Trees that have grown in the same patterns for generations are suddenly altering their root systems, digging deeper, reaching for something underground. When researchers investigated, they found that these trees were actually connecting with deep earth microbial networks through root systems that extended much deeper than anyone thought possible. The trees weren't just growing randomly deeper, they were being guided by chemical signals from underground organisms that were essentially teaching them how to access new nutrient sources. The indigenous shamans had a word for this phenomenon that translates roughly to "the deep mothers are awakening." They described it as the forest learning to speak with the ancient spirits that live in the heart of the earth. What Western science is discovering is that their traditional knowledge might be more accurate than our modern theories about how ecosystems work. These trees are now showing enhanced growth rates, increased resistance to disease, and the ability to survive in conditions that would normally kill them. It's as if the deep biosphere is actively helping surface life adapt to changing environmental conditions. But there's a catch. The trees that make these connections become dependent on the deep organisms, unable to survive without the constant chemical communication from underground. Scientists are calling this phenomenon biological colonization, but they're not sure who's colonizing whom. Are the deep organisms recruiting surface life to serve their purposes, or are surface plants evolving to exploit resources from the deep biosphere? The answer might be both, and that's what's so terrifying about this discovery. Because if the deep biosphere can influence plant growth and behaviour, what else can it influence? Recent studies have found traces of deep earth biochemicals in the food chains of animals that live near these enhanced forests. Deer, birds, insects, even fish in nearby rivers are showing chemical signatures that match compounds produced by deep underground organisms. The implications are staggering. We might be looking at the early stages of a planetary biological merger, where the deep and surface biospheres are starting to integrate after billions of years of separation, and humans, with our deep drilling and mining operations, might be the unwitting matchmakers in this ancient reunion. But here's where things get really wild. Some of these deep earth organisms are producing compounds that don't just influence biological systems, they're creating entirely new forms of chemistry that shouldn't be possible under normal Earth conditions. Scientists have discovered mineral formations near deep drilling sites that contain elements arranged in ways that violate everything we know about crystal structure and chemical bonding. These aren't just unusual minerals, they're impossible minerals. The atomic arrangements require energy inputs and environmental conditions that don't exist anywhere on the surface. Yet somehow, these deep organisms are manufacturing them through biological processes that we can't even begin to understand. Dr. Maria Santos, a biochemist studying these impossible compounds, described them as looking like someone had taken the periodic table and rewritten the rules of chemistry. The molecules are stable, they're reproducible, and they have properties that could revolutionize everything from electronics to medicine. But we have no idea how the organisms are making them, or why. Some researchers are theorizing that these deep earth organisms might have access to forms of energy that we haven't discovered yet. They might be tapping into quantum mechanical effects, or harnessing energy from the planet's magnetic field, or even utilizing forces that we don't have names for. They've had billions of years to experiment with the fundamental forces of nature, and they might have figured out tricks that our physics textbooks say are impossible. The really unsettling part is that these impossible compounds are starting to show up in surface environments. They're being detected in soil samples, in groundwater, even in the tissues of plants and animals that live near areas of deep drilling activity. It's as if the deep biosphere is seeding the surface world with its advanced chemistry, gradually introducing technologies that could fundamentally alter how surface life operates. And here's something that will keep you awake at night. Some of these compounds show up in laboratory tests as having properties that affect neural tissue. They can alter the electrical conductivity of nerve cells, change the permeability of cell membranes, and even influence the production of neurotransmitters in animal brains. Scientists have found these compounds in the water supplies of communities near deep drilling operations. People living in these areas are reporting unusual dreams, changes in sleep patterns, and what some describe as feeling more connected to the natural world around them. Medical researchers are still trying to determine if these effects are beneficial, harmful, or something else entirely. But the most disturbing discovery is that these neurochemical compounds seem to be designed. They're not random byproducts of deep Earth metabolism. They're sophisticated molecules that appear to have been engineered for specific biological effects. It's as if the deep biosphere has been studying surface life for millions of years, learning how our nervous systems work and developing chemical tools to interact with them. The question that's haunting scientists is whether these compounds represent an attempt at communication or an attempt at control. Are the deep organisms trying to establish a dialogue with surface life? Or are they implementing a biological takeover that's so subtle we won't notice until it's too late? Recent studies have shown that people exposed to these compounds over extended periods begin to show changes in their EEG patterns. Their brainwaves start to synchronize with low-frequency vibrations that match the seismic pulses detected from deep underground locations. It's as if their nervous systems are being tuned to receive signals from the deep biosphere. Some of these individuals report experiencing what they describe as deep thoughts, insights and ideas that seem to come from outside their normal thought processes. They describe feeling connected to vast networks of information, as if they're accessing a kind of planetary consciousness that exists beneath the surface world. The implications are terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. We might be witnessing the early stages of a new form of evolution, where biological systems separated by billions of years of isolation are finally beginning to merge into something unprecedented in the history of life on Earth. But we have no idea what this merger will produce, or whether humanity will remain recognizable after it's complete. The deep biosphere has already proven that it operates by rules we don't understand, using technologies we can't replicate, with goals and intentions that remain completely mysterious to us. What's clear is that the ground beneath our feet isn't just alive, it's intelligent, it's ancient, and it's starting to make its presence known in ways that are fundamentally altering the nature of life on Earth. We're not just discovering new forms of life in the deep crust. We're encountering a form of intelligence that might be older and more sophisticated than anything we've ever imagined. And it's been waiting down there, in the crushing darkness, for billions of years, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself, waiting for us to develop the technology to reach it, waiting to begin a conversation that might change everything we think we know about consciousness, intelligence, and what it means to be alive on this planet. The question now isn't whether life can thrive beneath Earth's crust. The question is whether we're ready for what's been thriving down there all along, and whether we can survive the conversation it wants to have with us. Because ready or not, that conversation has already begun. And the deep biosphere has been preparing for it a lot longer than we have. The most chilling part of this emerging dialogue isn't what these deep organisms are saying to us, it's what they're saying to each other about us. Because scientists monitoring the chemical communications between deep Earth communities have detected patterns that suggest they're sharing information about human activities with a level of detail that should be impossible. Think about this for a moment. These organisms have no eyes, no conventional sensory organs, no way to directly observe what happens on the surface. Yet they're somehow tracking human population movements, industrial activities, even seasonal changes in agriculture. They know when we're drilling deeper, when we're extracting more resources, when we're changing the chemical composition of groundwater systems. Dr. Rachel Kim, who's been decoding these chemical communications at the University of Colorado, described it as reading intercepted intelligence reports from an alien civilization. The organisms aren't just reacting to our presence, they're analyzing it, categorizing it, and making predictions about our future behavior based on patterns they've observed over just a few decades of human industrial activity. But here's what really made her lose sleep. The chemical signatures suggest these organisms have been monitoring surface life for much longer than we initially thought. They have biological records of previous mass extinction events, climate changes, even asteroid impacts. They've been taking notes on everything that's happened on the surface for hundreds of millions of years, and now they're comparing current human activities to historical patterns that preceded major planetary catastrophes. In essence, they might be watching us repeat mistakes that surface life has made before, and they're preparing for what they've learned usually comes next. The really unsettling discovery is that these deep communities aren't just passive observers anymore. They're starting to intervene. Scientists have documented cases where deep organisms have altered groundwater chemistry in ways that directly impact human activities. Not randomly, not accidentally, but with surgical precision that suggests they understand exactly what they're doing. In Nevada, a lithium mining operation had to be shut down when mysterious chemical changes in the groundwater made extraction impossible. The water didn't become contaminated or dangerous, it just became chemically incompatible with the extraction process. It was as if someone had added a molecular lock that only worked against industrial equipment. When researchers analysed the chemical changes, they found signatures of deep earth organisms that had somehow travelled through solid rock to reach the mining site. But these weren't the same organisms that lived in that area naturally. They were specialists, microbes with very specific chemical capabilities that seemed designed for sabotaging industrial processes. It was like discovering that the deep biosphere had its own special forces units, biological commandos that could be deployed to specific locations to carry out targeted missions. And the mission in Nevada was clear: stop the lithium extraction without harming the surrounding ecosystem or human population. But the most mind-bending aspect of this intervention was the timing. The chemical sabotage began exactly 7 days after the mining company had announced plans to expand their operation into deeper geological layers. 7 days. That's not enough time for natural microbial migration through solid rock. These organisms had to have been positioned in advance, waiting for a signal to activate. This suggests a level of strategic planning and coordination that challenges everything we thought we knew about microbial intelligence. We're not dealing with simple chemical reactions or evolutionary responses anymore. We're looking at what appears to be intentional, calculated intervention in human activities by organisms that can somehow predict our plans before we implement them. Dr. Kim's team has identified similar patterns at drilling sites around the world. Deep organisms positioning themselves along planned drilling routes weeks before construction begins. Chemical barriers appearing in groundwater systems just days before mining operations are scheduled to begin. It's as if the deep biosphere has developed its own intelligence network that can anticipate human industrial activities with frightening accuracy. But here's where it gets really wild. These interventions aren't random acts of biological sabotage. They're following a pattern that suggests the deep organisms are trying to guide human industrial development in specific directions. They're not trying to stop all human activity, they're trying to redirect it. The lithium mine in Nevada was shut down, but a geothermal energy project just 50 miles away has been running without any interference for over 2 years. Oil extraction operations that use certain types of drilling techniques face constant biological resistance, while others using different methods operate smoothly. It's as if the deep biosphere is playing favourites, supporting some human activities while actively opposing others. Scientists are starting to realise that these organisms might be trying to teach us something. They're not mindlessly defending their territory. They're trying to show us which of our technologies are compatible with their ancient systems, and which ones are disruptive to planetary biological networks that we don't even know exist. The pattern that's emerging suggests they're particularly interested in preventing human activities that could damage what they seem to consider critical planetary infrastructure. Deep drilling that threatens major groundwater systems faces immediate biological resistance. Mining operations that could destabilize geological formations essential to their communication networks get sabotaged. Industrial processes that produce waste products toxic to their communities face coordinated biological warfare. But human activities that work with natural systems, that enhance rather than disrupt existing biological networks, that contribute to the health of planetary ecosystems, these get biological support. Enhanced crop growth, improved soil chemistry, even protection from natural disasters. It's like discovering that the Earth itself has been trying to train us, using a system of biological rewards and punishments to guide human civilization toward activities that support rather than threaten the planet's overall health. And we've been completely oblivious to this training program for our entire industrial history. Dr. Kim described it as realizing that we've been students in a classroom we didn't know we were in, with teachers we couldn't see, learning lessons we didn't understand we were being taught. The deep biosphere hasn't been passively enduring human industrial development, it's been actively trying to influence it, to shape it, to guide it towards something sustainable. But here's the terrifying part. Our recent technological advances might have finally crossed a threshold that's triggered a change in their teaching methods. The biological interventions are becoming more frequent, more targeted, more sophisticated. It's as if our invisible teachers have decided that gentle guidance isn't working anymore, and they're moving to more direct forms of instruction. The chemical communications between deep communities have intensified dramatically over the past 5 years, corresponding almost exactly with the acceleration of human deep drilling activities. The biological sabotage events are increasing in frequency and sophistication. And most unsettling of all, the deep organisms are starting to experiment with direct biological modification of surface environments. Scientists have documented cases where entire forest ecosystems have been chemically altered overnight by deep organisms, with trees suddenly developing new capabilities, new resistances, new chemical productions that didn't exist in their genetic makeup before. It's like watching evolution happen in fast forward, guided by an intelligence that can rewrite biological software in real time. These modified ecosystems aren't random experiments, they're demonstrations. The deep biosphere is showing us what's possible when biological systems work together instead of against each other. They're creating proof-of-concept ecosystems that operate with efficiency levels that make our most advanced agricultural systems look primitive. Forests that can clean polluted air in days instead of years. Grasslands that can absorb carbon dioxide at rates that could reverse climate change within decades. Wetland systems that can process industrial waste into beneficial compounds that enhance rather than damage surrounding ecosystems. But these demonstrations come with a message that's becoming increasingly clear. This is what's possible when surface and deep biospheres work together. This is what we could achieve if we stopped fighting the planetary systems that have been operating successfully for billions of years and started learning to cooperate with them instead. The choice, according to the chemical communications scientists are decoding, is becoming binary. We can learn to work with the deep biosphere and gain access to biological technologies that could solve every environmental crisis we face, or we can continue to oppose it and face increasingly aggressive biological resistance that could make human industrial civilization impossible to maintain. The deep organisms aren't threatening to destroy us, they're offering to transform us. But the transformation would require giving up our illusion of dominance over nature and accepting our role as junior partners in a planetary biological system that's infinitely older and more sophisticated than human civilization. Recent communications suggest they're preparing to make this choice easier for us by demonstrating just how dependent we really are on systems we never knew existed. The synchronized seismic pulses detected across continents aren't just communications anymore, they're preparations. Dr. Kim's latest analysis suggests the deep biosphere is coordinating a global demonstration of its capabilities that will make its presence impossible to ignore. Something that will force human civilization to acknowledge that we're not the dominant intelligence on this planet, that we never have been, and that our survival depends on learning to cooperate with intelligences that have been managing planetary systems since before complex life existed on the surface. The countdown has already begun. The deep organisms are positioning themselves for what appears to be the most significant biological event in human history. Not an attack, not an invasion, but a revelation that will change everything we thought we knew about our place in the natural world. And it's happening right now, beneath our feet, in the crushing darkness where the oldest intelligence on Earth has been waiting patiently for billions of years for surface life to finally evolve enough wisdom to have a real conversation. The question isn't whether we're ready for this conversation anymore. The question is whether we're ready for what happens if we refuse to participate in it, because the deep biosphere has made it very clear that the choice is ours to make, but it won't wait forever for us to make it. And every deep drilling project, every mining operation, every industrial activity that disrupts their ancient systems brings us closer to a demonstration of their capabilities that will leave no doubt about who really runs this planet. The ground beneath your feet isn't just alive and intelligent, it's patient, it's powerful, and it's running out of patience with our refusal to acknowledge its presence. The conversation it wants to have with us isn't a request anymore, it's becoming a requirement. But what happens when that requirement becomes an ultimatum? Because that's exactly where we find ourselves right now. and the evidence coming in from monitoring stations around the world suggests we've already crossed that threshold without even realizing it. Let me tell you about what happened 3 months ago in the Atacama Desert that's making scientists question whether we still have any control over this situation at all. The Atacama, one of the driest places on Earth, suddenly experienced what researchers are calling impossible rainfall, not just a few drops, but sustained precipitation in patterns that meteorologists say shouldn't exist according to any known weather system. But here's the kicker. The rain wasn't coming from clouds. Satellite imagery showed clear skies during the entire event. The water was seeping up from underground, emerging from fissures in the desert floor that hadn't existed the day before. And when they analysed the water, they found it was teeming with microorganisms that had never been catalogued before, deep Earth species that shouldn't be able to survive in surface conditions. Within weeks, the Atacama began transforming. Plants that hadn't grown there in thousands of years started sprouting from the artificially moistened soil. But these weren't normal desert plants. They were hybrid species that showed genetic markers from both surface vegetation and deep Earth organisms. It was like watching two completely separate evolutionary timelines merge in real time. Dr. Eleanor Rodriguez, who led the investigation team, described it as witnessing the planet perform surgery on itself. The deep biosphere wasn't just modifying the surface environment, it was rewriting the genetic code of surface life to make it compatible with deep Earth systems. And it was doing this without asking permission from the species being modified. The implications are staggering. We're not just talking about environmental modification anymore, we're looking at biological conscription. The deep organisms aren't waiting for surface life to adapt to their presence, they're actively adapting surface life to serve their purposes. But the Atacama event was just the beginning. Similar transformations have been reported in the Sahara, the Australian outback, and the Gobi Desert. All areas where the deep biosphere can access surface environments with minimal human interference. It's as if they're establishing beachheads, creating hybrid zones where deep and surface biology can operate together. And here's what's really terrifying. These hybrid zones are expanding. The modified organisms aren't just surviving in their artificially created environments, they're spreading outward, carrying deep Earth genetic modifications into existing surface ecosystems. We're watching the early stages of a planetary biological merger that's happening whether we participate or not. Recent satellite data shows these hybrid zones are now covering over 200,000 square kilometers of previously normal desert terrain. That's an area larger than most countries, and it's growing by hundreds of square kilometers every day. At this rate, the entire surface of the planet could be biologically integrated with the deep biosphere within decades. But here's where things get really mind-bending. The organisms in these hybrid zones aren't just different biologically. They're displaying behaviors that suggest they're operating under completely different physical laws. Plants that photosynthesize at night using starlight, microorganisms that can survive in hard vacuum conditions, soil bacteria that generate their own magnetic fields. It's like discovering that the deep biosphere has been developing its own version of physics for billions of years, and now it's teaching those principles to surface life. The hybrid organisms aren't just biologically advanced, they're demonstrating capabilities that our current understanding of chemistry and physics says should be impossible. Dr. Rodriguez's team documented one case where modified desert plants were generating electrical currents sufficient to power their monitoring equipment. Not through any known biological process, but by manipulating quantum mechanical effects at the cellular level. The plants had essentially become living batteries that could tap into the zero-point energy field. But the most disturbing discovery came when they tried to study these plants in laboratory conditions. The moment the specimens were removed from their hybrid zone environment, they began sending out chemical distress signals that were detected by similar plants thousands of miles away. Within hours, every hybrid zone on the planet was showing coordinated responses to the laboratory sampling. It was like discovering that the entire planetary transformation project was being monitored by a distributed intelligence network that could coordinate responses across continents in real time. The deep biosphere wasn't just modifying surface environments randomly. It was implementing a coordinated global strategy with monitoring systems more sophisticated than anything human technology has achieved. And here's what really keeps scientists awake at night. The response to laboratory sampling wasn't just communication, it was retaliation. The hybrid zones began producing airborne compounds that caused the research equipment to malfunction. Not randomly, but with surgical precision that targeted specific electronic components, while leaving biological systems unharmed. It was biological warfare conducted at the molecular level, with weapons designed to disable human technology without harming human biology. The message was clear. You can observe, but you cannot interfere. You can learn, but you cannot control. Dr. Rodriguez described it as being put on notice by an intelligence that had been studying human technology for decades and had developed countermeasures for every form of interference we might attempt. The deep biosphere wasn't just ahead of us biologically, it was ahead of us technologically as well. But the most chilling aspect of this technological sophistication is how it's being deployed. The deep organisms aren't using their advanced capabilities to attack human civilization directly. Instead, they're using them to make human technology increasingly dependent on biological systems that they control. So here we are, standing at the threshold of the most profound discovery in human history. The ground beneath your feet isn't just solid rock and soil. It's a living, breathing, intelligent network that's been operating for billions of years, watching, learning, and now actively reshaping our world. We've uncovered evidence of vast underground cities of microorganisms, biological technologies that defy physics, and a planetary intelligence that's been preparing for this moment since before complex life existed on the surface. The deep biosphere isn't just thriving beneath Earth's crust, it's awakening, and whether we're ready or not, it's demanding a conversation that will determine the future of life on our planet.